I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the seating chart. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had rearranged my dining room as if it were her personal stage set. The place cards I'd printed, the arrangement I'd planned, the quiet little touches that made the evening hours, all replaced. She had done it with that same breezy confidence she used when critiquing my life choices, smiling as if she were helping. I took a slow breath and straightened a napkin, letting the familiar coolness settle over me. Years in corporate negotiations had taught me one thing: people reveal themselves when they believe you won't push back. My husband, Daniel, barely looked up from his phone as she worked. "Mom just wants things to look nice, Claire," he said. "Don't stress." I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence sometimes told the truth better than any argument. Besides, tonight was supposed to be a small family dinner: his parents, his sister, and us. I'd cooked everything myself after a long week at work, hoping for just a bit of peace. By the time everyone arrived, Margaret had already taken control. She greeted her daughter, Leah, with a tight hug and me with a limp handshake that somehow conveyed both superiority and pity. The brass key to our back door, the key I'd given her for emergencies, hung from her purse like a trophy. She loved reminding me she had access. Dinner started fine. A little wine, polite conversation. And then Margaret glanced at my blouse, the simple navy one I wore after changing out of work clothes, and said it with a sweet, venom-dipped smile. "Well, look at you, dear. You really do look like the maid tonight." Leah snorted. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, like it was some harmless joke. My body went cold. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. I felt the room tilt, just slightly. The humiliation hit in a quiet wave, not dramatic, not loud, just sharp and deep. I placed the serving dish on the table with careful hands, making sure nothing trembled. "Is that so?" I asked lightly, keeping my voice steady. "Good thing I'm off duty soon." Margaret chuckled as if she'd won something. Daniel kept laughing, shaking his head. I stared at him for a long second, memorizing the curve of his smile. My husband, my partner, had chosen entertainment over respect. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food I'd cooked. Whenever I tried to speak, Leah interrupted. Whenever I shifted the conversation, Margaret redirected it. Daniel saw none of it, or pretended not to. But the thing that broke something in me wasn't the insult. It was the laughter. The way Daniel's shoulders shook. The way he didn't even see the problem. When they finally left, I began clearing plates. My phone buzzed on the counter. A reminder I'd set earlier in the day, one of those mundane pings about a contract renewal coming up. The timing was ironic. I wiped my hands on a towel and just stared at the notification. Marriage is a contract too, I thought. And contracts have clauses. I glanced at the brass key on the hook Margaret had casually left behind. I held it between my fingers, feeling its weight. Motif, lesson, warning, whatever it was, it grounded me. That night, when Daniel went to bed without a single apology or even a hint of reflection, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop glowing against the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened my lawyer's contact. Not because I wanted to end anything yet, but because I needed clarity. I needed to understand what leverage existed. If boundary and consent were going to be tonight's theme, then I intended to reclaim both. "Hi, Melissa," I typed. "I need to go over something in my prenup. It's about the property clause. Can we talk first thing tomorrow?" I hit send. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge. My hands were steady, my breathing slow. If they wanted a maid, they were about to learn exactly how much power the maid actually had. I woke before dawn, the house still and gray, the kind of quiet that exposes every thought you've been trying to ignore. Daniel was asleep beside me, his back turned, breathing evenly, unconcerned. The faint outline of his shoulders against the dim light almost fooled me into remembering the man I married 8 years ago, the one who defended me, listened to me, saw me. But last night's laughter replayed with perfect clarity. The way he'd tilted his head back, amused. The way he'd ignored the sting in my eyes. The way he hadn't even realized he'd chosen a side. I dressed quietly, grabbed my sea blue scarf from the hook, another motif I hadn't intended to cling to, but it grounded me, and left the house before he woke. Outside, the sunrise barely brushed the horizon, and the morning air carried the chilled promise of change. Melissa's office was warm, freshly lit. She was a sharp, composed woman in her 40s with a mind that cut through problems like glass. When she'd first drafted our prenup, I'd admired her precision. Today, I needed that precision more than ever. "Rough night?" she asked as I sat down. I let out a slow breath. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's heard that tone before," she said, clicking her pen. "Tell me." I recounted the dinner. Not dramatized, not embellished, just the raw facts. Her face tightened at all the right moments, especially when I described the Maid comment. "And your husband laughed?" "Yes." "No defense?" "None." She leaned back, thoughtful. "You mentioned the property clause. Remind me, you own the house, correct?" "I bought it before the marriage," I said. "It's fully in my name." Then I recall there was a conditional cohabitation clause embedded in the prenup. "Something you wanted added because you'd seen a friend lose her home during separation." I nodded. "It requires mutual respect as part of shared residency." It sounded silly when we added it. "It's not silly now," she said. "If you can demonstrate a pattern of hostile conduct from him or his immediate family that he condones, you have grounds to enforce temporary removal from the residence." "Removal?" I repeated. "As in, he leaves the house?" "Yes." She folded her hands. "The clause was designed to protect your emotional safety in the home you purchased. If you feel unsafe or disrespected, and if you have evidence he's participating in or enabling that environment, the clause gives you the right to request he vacate until the issue is resolved." My heart thudded. Not fear, clarity. "Melissa," I said slowly, "do text messages count as evidence?" "They absolutely do." That small spark inside me, tiny last night, cooling in humiliation, flared just a bit. Because I had something. Something accidental. Something time-stamped. I reached into my bag and handed her my phone. I opened the group text thread between Daniel, his mother, and his sister. It wasn't often active, but last week, before the dinner, they'd shared something I hadn't confronted. It was a picture of my work blazer draped over the kitchen chair after a late night. Margaret had written, "She leaves things everywhere. No wonder the house feels messy when she's home." Leah responded, "Future Maid energy." And Daniel? He sent a single laughing emoji. At the time, I'd rolled my eyes and let it go. Now, Melissa stared at it with the look of someone who had just watched a door unlock. "Claire," she said, calm but firm, "this is exactly the kind of pattern the clause refers to." "It's childish," I whispered. "It's petty." "It's documentation," she corrected. She printed the messages, slid them into a folder, and then turned to me with a seriousness that made my pulse slow. "Are you trying to divorce him today?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "Not today." "Then what do you want?" I took my time. I chose my words carefully. "I want boundaries. And I want them to understand they don't get to walk into my home and treat me like help. I won't be humiliated in my own dining room." "Then," she said, "we'll proceed with the temporary enforcement clause. He'll get a formal notice. He'll have to stay elsewhere for a short period." "And his mother?" I asked tightly. "She has no legal right to be in your home at all," Melissa said. "Her copy of the key? Unless you gave it directly to her, she's in violation of trespassing and household access statutes." I let out a breathless laugh. "I gave it to her. I was trying to be generous." "Then you can revoke that generosity," she said. "Return of access requests are straightforward." That was the moment something shifted inside me, not revenge, not anger, but a clean, precise understanding. Respect wasn't going to arrive politely. I would have to demand it. After we finalized the initial paperwork, Melissa handed me the sealed envelope for Daniel. "He doesn't need to panic," she said gently. "This isn't divorce. It's a boundary." "A necessary one," I murmured. When I returned home, Daniel was in the kitchen making coffee, humming like the world was perfect. When he saw me, he smiled as if last night's insult didn't exist. "You left early," he said. "Everything okay?" "Depends," I said, placing the sealed envelope on the counter between us. His smile faltered. "We need to talk." He glanced at it warily. "What's this?" "Clarity," I said simply. He picked it up slowly, reading the attorney header. His face drained a little. "Claire, what the hell? All you have to do is read it." He tore it open, scanning quickly, and his reaction was immediate: confusion, irritation, then the beginnings of fear. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm asking you," I said evenly, "to respect our home and my place in it." It was a joke. "You laughed at your mother calling your wife the maid," I said quietly. "If you can't see the problem, then we need space until you can." His jaw tightened. "This is extreme." "No," I said, wrapping my sea blue scarf around my hand. "Extreme was the way you treated me last night." Before he could argue, my phone buzzed. A new message flashed across the screen, from Margaret. "Daniel just called. I'm coming over. Don't do anything stupid." Daniel saw it too. And he looked terrified. Because for the first time, he realized. I wasn't the maid. I was the one holding the keys. I didn't answer Margaret's text. I simply locked the front door. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just, quietly. One click. A boundary that finally had weight. Daniel watched me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Claire, don't escalate this," he said, rubbing his forehead. "She's upset." "She can be upset in her own home," I replied, stepping past him into the hallway. "Ours is off limits until further notice." "You can't block her out." "She's my mother." "And I'm your wife," I said. "One role doesn't erase the other." We stood in silence, a small distance between us that suddenly felt like miles. I walked upstairs to my office, leaving him in the kitchen with his cooling coffee and the envelope that had rewritten the day. I needed to think, to breathe, to pull back just enough to see the whole picture, because anger was loud, but strategy whispered. And the whisper said, "This isn't just about last night. This was about patterns. And patterns leave trails." Margaret arrived 10 minutes later. I heard her knocking, no, pounding, followed by the high, piercing ring of the doorbell. And then, with the predictability of a bad sitcom, I heard her use the brass key I'd given her. Except the lock didn't budge. I'd changed the code on the smart deadbolt last night after sending Melissa the message. A moment of instinct I didn't quite understand then, but now felt like pure intuition. My phone lit up with 2 notifications. Doorbell cam, motion detected. Margaret C. Attempted entry, denied. I watched the live feed. There she was in full, indignant glory, hair perfect, lips pursed, eyes narrowed, yanking the doorknob like she could break the house into obedience. "Claire," she shrilled at the camera. "Open this door." Daniel rushed over, his footsteps frantic. "Mom, stop. You can't barge in." "I have a key," she snapped, rattling the handle again. "Not anymore," I said calmly from the top of the stairs. Margaret spun toward the doorbell camera. "Claire, don't you dare." "Margaret," I said, leaning into view of the upstairs hallway camera, knowing she could see me on her end. "Your access was revoked. Please leave." Her hand flew to her chest in theatrical outrage. "You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done. You rearranged my home, insulted me in my own dining room, and mocked my work life in a group chat," I said. "I'm done playing polite. Daniel stood frozen between us, one woman outside the door, one woman upstairs, and him in the middle, caught between ego and reality. "This is out of control," he muttered. "Claire, let's just talk." "We'll talk," I said. "But not while she's in the house." Margaret leaned toward the camera again. "Daniel, let me in. Now." And then, in a moment that would become important later, she hissed under her breath, yet clear enough for my system mic to capture. "She won't have this house for long once we sign the new agreement." "An agreement?" My gut chilled. "What agreement?" I called down. Both Daniel and Margaret froze. Margaret blinked at the camera, caught. "Oh. Nothing. Just family talk." Daniel's eyes darted sideways. "Mom." But they said enough with their silence. I ended the feed and walked downstairs. Margaret saw the deadbolt light shift from red to green and straighten like she'd won. But I only opened the door a few inches, blocking the entrance with my body. "You mentioned an agreement," I said evenly. "Explain." Her cheeks flushed. "It's not your concern." "It's about my house?" "It's about our family," she snapped. "Daniel deserves security." "We all do." There it was. A puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing. Daniel reached for her arm. "Mom, don't." But she jerked away. "Oh please, Daniel." She already called a lawyer like a madwoman. She should know what real lawyers can do. The implication landed like a cold stone in my chest. They'd been planning something. Something involving my property. Something they hadn't intended to tell me until they needed my signature, or until they tried to go around me. And in that moment, the final veil between us fell. I stepped back, letting the door open just enough so she could see I wasn't afraid. "Margaret, unless you can articulate exactly what you and your son were planning, you're trespassing." Her jaw wobbled. "Claire." Daniel finally moved. "Mom, please. Let me talk to her alone." Margaret glared at him but seemed to understand she'd crossed a line too quickly. She pointed at me with a trembling, furious finger. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, "it is. For today." I closed the door slowly, watching her through the glass as she stormed back to her car. Daniel let out a brittle exhale and slumped into a dining chair, rubbing his temples. "Claire," he said weakly, "I can explain." "You're going to," I replied. "Every detail." He hesitated, too long. And that hesitation told me more than any confession. So I played my first card. "I have the doorbell recording," I said. "All of it is timestamped." His head snapped up. "You recorded her?" "She recorded herself," I said. "In my doorway. On my property." His face went pale. Because now, the balance of power had shifted. Not by yelling. Not by emotion. But by evidence. "We're going to sit down," I said, "and you're going to start telling the truth. Whether you like it or not." He swallowed hard. And finally, Daniel began to look afraid of losing something real. Daniel stared at the dining table like it was an interrogation room. In a way, it was. I sat across from him, my hands folded, the sea blue scarf looped loosely around my wrist like a quiet reminder of who I was before they tried to shrink me. He kept glancing toward the front window, as if hoping his mother would reappear and rescue him from having to speak. She didn't. And the silence grew until it forced him to open his mouth. "There wasn't some conspiracy," he started, but his voice wavered. "It's not what you think." "That depends," I said. "Tell me what I'm thinking." He exhaled sharply, frustrated. "You're thinking we were trying to take your house." "We weren't." "Then what agreement was your mother talking about?" He dragged a hand through his hair. "It was just an idea she had. Something about estate planning. She thought it'd make things simpler if." "If what, Daniel?" "If the deed had both our names." There it was. Said too quickly, too cornered, without the usual sugarcoating. He didn't even realize he'd given away the truth in one sentence. My heart didn't break. That had already happened last night. What I felt now was something cleaner, the clarity of a solved equation. So you wanted me to add your name to the deed, I said. Behind my back. No, he insisted. She wanted it. She said it was embarrassing that her son lived in a house he didn't own. She said people talk. I let out a cold breath. People talk? Or she talks? He slammed his palms lightly against the table. Claire, come on. You make more money than me. You bought the house. Mom hates that. She thinks it makes me look weak. And you believe her. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He dropped his gaze, guilt tracing across his features like a shadow. For a moment, he looked younger. Smaller. Like a boy caught cheating on a school exam. You could have asked me, I said softly. We could have discussed it. But instead you laughed while your mother called me the maid. He flinched. Good. At least one part of him was capable of shame. I didn't mean it like that, he murmured. It was stupid. I thought it was a joke. You laughed at me. Not with me. Silence. I opened the folder Melissa had given me and slid out the printed group chat messages. His eyes widened. Claire, don't do this. I'm showing you what disrespect looks like, I said. And how long it's been happening without you caring. He looked at the papers, then at me, back and forth, as if choosing where to place his allegiance. For once, he seemed genuinely torn. But even then, he didn't apologize, not with sincerity. What he said instead was, so what now? You want me to leave? I would like you to comply with the agreement, I said. For a short time. And if I don't? Then we escalate, I replied calmly. His nostrils flared. You're weaponizing the prenup. You weaponized my dignity first. His chair scraped sharply as he pushed back and stood. Fine, he snapped. Fine. If you want space, you'll get it. He stormed off to pack, mumbling curses under his breath, too low for me to hear clearly, but loud enough to tell me exactly how much he hated being held accountable. When he came downstairs with a bag slung over his shoulder, he paused in the foyer. Is this what you wanted? He said, bitterness seeping through every word. What I wanted? I wanted back the man who loved me with curiosity, not convenience. I wanted a partner, not a spectator to my humiliation. But I didn't say any of that. I want respect, I said simply. And boundaries. He scoffed, grabbed his keys, and slammed the door behind him. I stood in the quiet house, letting the tension drain slowly. Not triumph. Not relief. Just an exhale of truth. Alone, I walked to the front window and watched him drive away. My fingers grazed the brass key Margaret had left yesterday. It still hung on the hook like a reminder of every line crossed. I took it down. Opened the back door. And dropped it into the trash bin outside. Let her knock next time. Let her ask permission. By mid-afternoon, I received a message from Melissa. Just a heads up, Daniel's mother contacted someone. I'm forwarding you the voicemail transcription. My pulse quickened. I opened the file. Margaret's voice, clipped and furious. She thinks she can kick him out. I want to know how we can challenge the prenup. She's getting too bold. And I want the house secured before she does something stupid. Before I do something stupid. I stared at the transcript, anger simmering but controlled. They still didn't understand. They still believed I was the fragile one. They still believed they held the upper hand. And that was when I remembered the hidden lease clause, the one tucked into a rental agreement for our small guest house at the back of the property. The one Daniel insisted we could just sign without reading because it was standard. Except it wasn't. I'd read it. Thoroughly. And tucked neatly into Section 4B was a line stating, "No secondary occupants or visitors may access the primary residence without written consent from the property owner." The property owner was me. And Margaret had been using her key freely. I scrolled through my doorbell camera archives. When the system sorted recordings, it tagged anything unusual. She had entered, without knocking, 3 times last month alone. Trespassing. Documented. Timestamped. My heart stayed steady. My breaths even. The pieces were assembling themselves, one by one, into the picture I had quietly known existed all along. I wasn't the maid. I was the owner. And now I had everything I needed to prove it. As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched through the house, a sense of calm washed over me, not spiteful, not vengeful, just assured. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly what boundaries meant. Not because I shouted, but because I understood the power of a carefully placed clause, and the truth that emerges when someone believes you're too soft to fight back. They were about to realize softness is not the opposite of strength. Sometimes, it's the precursor to it. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, surprisingly, it was the opposite. My mind felt charged, focused, crisp, the way it does before a major presentation or contract negotiation. Everything had been seated, documented, lined up with a precision that even I hadn't expected from myself. By morning, the house felt different. Not empty, just, mine again. Quiet. Honest. The doorbell chimed at 8:14 a.m. I already knew who it would be. Through the camera feed, Margaret stood on the porch in a long charcoal coat, clutching her handbag like she was bracing for battle. Her expression, however, had changed. Less fury. More calculation. She wasn't here to yell. She was here to negotiate. I let the door stay closed and pressed the intercom button. "Yes, Margaret?" Her smile tightened the way a rope tightens around a knot. "Claire, dear. We should talk inside." "No," I said. "We can talk here." Her eyes narrowed at the rejection. "Daniel told me he's staying at a hotel." "That's ridiculous." "You blew a minor misunderstanding out of proportion." "Calling me the maid wasn't a misunderstanding." "Oh please," she scoffed. "You're so sensitive." "And you're so entitled," I replied calmly. "What brings you here?" She lifted her chin. "I'm willing to put last night behind us. But we need to sort out the deed issue." There it was, straight to the point. "No," I said simply. "We do not." She blinked. "I think you misunderstand. This isn't optional. My son deserves." "Your son deserves to be treated with the same respect he gives," I interrupted. "And he gave none." Her jaw twitched. "You're being childish." "No," I said, my tone steady, "I'm being lawful." I tapped my phone. The doorbell camera switched views, displaying a clipped video from a week ago, Margaret entering my home while neither Daniel nor I were present. Timestamps blazing clear. She paled. How did? You let yourself in 3 times last month without permission. That violates the secondary occupant clause on the guesthouse lease." "That stupid little cottage agreement?" she snapped. "It's irrelevant. Nobody reads those things." "I do," I said, voice low. "And now it's evidence." The silence crackled. I continued, "You trespassed on private property." "My property. And now you want me to sign half of it over to Daniel because your pride can't handle that your son lives in a house he didn't buy?" Her lips parted, then sealed shut as if words betrayed her. I didn't let her recover. "You insulted me in my own dining room. You mocked me in texts. You planted this idea that I should hand over what I worked for. I did no such." "You told him he looked weak living in my house," I said. "I heard it from his mouth." She flinched. That reaction told me everything. Then she did something almost pitiful. She tried to soften. "I'm only trying to protect my son," she murmured. A woman with ambition, your career, men feel overshadowed. Ah. The old, tired blade. You don't get to dress insecurity up as tradition, I said. Her face hardened again. You're making a mistake, Claire. My only mistake was letting you treat me like I'd earned less than you. Her brows stitched together. So that's it? You're going to push my son out of his own home? No, I said. He pushed me into boundaries. The prenup clause enforces a cooling-off period. He'll return when it's healthy for both of us. And if he doesn't come back? She asked quietly. That will be his choice, I replied. Not yours. A shadow fell over her expression. She wasn't used to losing. But she also wasn't used to someone being both soft-spoken and immovable. I suggest, I added, you head home. Margaret opened her mouth again, then closed it when I raised the phone slightly. She remembered the camera. The timestamps. Her own words. Finally, she turned and walked to her car, shoulders stiff, her silence louder than any insult she'd ever thrown at me. Inside, the house felt lighter. The tiny victory wasn't in outsmarting her. It was in reclaiming the air she'd polluted for years. But the battle wasn't finished, not yet. At noon, Melissa called. Are you sitting? She asked. I'm at my desk, I said. What happened now? Daniel reached out, she replied. He wants to meet. He says he has something important to show you. A cynical part of me braced. Should I be concerned? I asked. Not concerned, she said. Just prepared. He sounded panicked. Not angry. That was new. We agreed I'd meet him at a neutral place, a cafe downtown. I arrived early, sitting near the window. My scarf lay loosely across my lap as I stirred a tea I didn't really want. Daniel walked in looking disheveled, as if one night away from home had cracked open a vault inside him. His hair was messy, his eyes tired. He dropped into the seat across from me. Claire, he said, voice thick. I need to tell you something. I folded my hands. I'm listening. He placed his phone on the table and pulled up a set of messages, screenshots. Not to incriminate me. To expose something else. They were from Margaret. To him. From the last few weeks. Convince her to add your name. She needs pressure. Don't back down. A man shouldn't depend on a woman's property. If she resists, I'll handle her. You deserve better than a wife who thinks she's above you. And the worst. She won't see it coming if we move quickly. I breathed out slowly, shock mixing with a grim type of recognition. I didn't want to go along with it, Daniel said, voice cracking. But she kept pushing. Every day. She made me feel like I was less. Like our marriage wasn't balanced unless we controlled the deed. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. Because I was stupid, he whispered. And because I thought you wouldn't understand what it's like to feel inferior. And then, unexpectedly, he cried. Quietly. Barely audible. But the kind of crying that came from something bruised long before last night. Claire, he said, fighting his breath, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the dinner. For laughing. For letting her dig her claws into our marriage. I was wrong. I didn't speak. I let him unravel. He wiped his face. I want to make this right. I'll sign anything. Statements. Affidavits. Whatever you need for protection. I don't want to lose you. For the first time since the humiliation, I felt something shift, not forgiveness, not immediately, but room. A small pocket of space for truth. Then we take responsibility, I said quietly. Together. He nodded vigorously. I'll do whatever it takes. I believed him, not blindly, but judiciously. He was not innocent. But he was no longer her puppet, either. I took the screenshots, forwarded them to Melissa, and rested my hands on the scarf. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about dismantling the root. And the root was Margaret. Daniel saw the resolve in my eyes. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I met his gaze. "Protect my home," I said. "And make sure your mother never tries to steal it again." Daniel and I returned to the house together the next morning. Not reunited, just aligned in a way we hadn't been in months. He carried the weight of guilt like a physical burden, but he didn't try to hide it anymore. I respected that. Not forgiveness yet, but accountability. The sun was barely up when we pulled into the driveway. The house looked peaceful, washed in the pale gold of morning. Mine. Always had been. But today, I felt it on a deeper level, not a possession, but a boundary I was finally willing to defend. Daniel paused at the door. "Do you want me to wait outside?" "No," I said. "We do this together." Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. No intrusions. No rearranged chairs. No insinuating footsteps that weren't mine. I breathed in the stillness before heading straight to my office. Melissa had emailed early, she was efficient like that. I opened her message and found the drafted notice, a formal revocation of access and no entry directive citing the guesthouse clause, the trespassing incidents, the recorded doorbell footage, and Daniel's forwarded screenshots. Neatly attached and timestamped. I forwarded the document to our printer. Daniel cleared his throat. "My mother's not going to react well." "She doesn't have to react well," I said. "She just has to obey." He nodded slowly, absorbing that truth. As the printer whirred, I glanced at the brass key I'd rescued from the trash bin, not to give back, but to keep as proof. Margaret liked symbols, she'd flaunted this one for years. Now it represented her overreach, the final thread she'd used to pull at the fabric of my home. Today, that thread snapped. At exactly 10 a.m., Margaret arrived. Not with fury this time, but with indignation sharpened to a blade. She stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, expression stiff. Daniel opened the door but didn't step aside for her. "Mom," he said evenly, "you're here to listen. Not to argue." Her eyes narrowed. "Daniel, you don't speak to me like that." He inhaled shakily. "I do now." I stepped forward, the printed document in my hand. "Margaret," I said. "Before you say anything, you need to see this." She snatched the papers from me and scanned them. Her jaw dropped. "What is this?" she demanded. "You're banning me from the property?" "No," I corrected. "The law is banning you." "I'm simply informing you." She glanced at Daniel for support, but he looked away. It was the first time he'd ever chosen neutrality over appeasement. It startled her more than any document. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "These doorbell videos, you recorded me without my knowledge?" "You walked onto my property without permission," I said. "And the cameras are posted. Clearly. On every entrance." She sputtered. This isn't how families handle things." "This isn't about family," I said calmly. "It's about boundaries. And consent." Her face reddened. "You're doing this because of a harmless joke?" "A joke," I said, "doesn't come with a campaign to take my house." She froze at the word campaign. Daniel stepped in gently but firmly. "Mom." I told her everything. Margaret's expression shattered, shock first, then betrayal, then something like panic. "All of it?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. Even then, even cornered, she tried one last tactic. "You can't trust her, Daniel. She's manipulating you. This lawyer stunt, she's turning you against your own mother." I could see him fighting himself, but then he took a step closer to me instead of her. "No," he said. "You turned me against her. I let you. And I'm ashamed of it." Her breath caught. "Daniel, I did this for you." "No," he murmured. You did it for control. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. I decided to end it. Margaret, I said, you violated the lease clause. You violated my privacy. You violated my home. This directive is effective immediately. You may not enter the property without written permission. You're exaggerating. You may appeal, I continued, unmoved, but the evidence is timestamped. Doorbell footage. Texts. Voicemails. Screenshots. All documented, all in chronological order. Her composure cracked. You collected all this? I didn't have to, I said. You created it. Her face went pale. I added the final piece, the brass key. This is yours, I said, placing it in her hand. And it won't open my door again. She stared at the key like it burned. You think you've won? I didn't come here to win, I said. I came here to live peacefully. Daniel nodded beside me. Mom, go home. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, Margaret looked small. Not pitiful. Just finally confronted with the truth she'd bulldozed past for too long. She stepped back slowly. You'll regret this. No, I replied softly. I won't. She turned, walked stiffly to her car, and drove off without another word. The moment the engine faded, something inside the house seemed to settle back into place, like furniture returning to its rightful position. Daniel sank into a chair, covering his face. I'm so sorry, he said again, quieter this time. I didn't realize how much I let her shape me. I sat beside him, not touching yet, but close enough. Awareness is the beginning, I said. The rest is what we choose next. He looked at me with a mix of relief and dread. Do you still want me here? I considered my answer with care. Yes, I said. But on new terms. My terms. Respect. Boundaries. And partnership. He nodded. I can do that. And therapy, I added pointedly. He winced. Yeah. That too. A faint smile curved my lips. Not victory. Just acknowledgement. This wasn't healing, it was the beginning of something resembling it. Later that evening, as the sky shifted to twilight, I stepped onto the porch with my sea blue scarf wrapped loosely around my neck. The house felt like mine again. Quiet. Safe. Protected. Daniel joined me silently. Thank you, he murmured. For what? I asked. For not giving up on us. I didn't respond with words. Just let the quiet settle, the cool air brushing my skin like an answered question. This wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about boundaries. About respect. About not letting someone rewrite the rules of my home while calling me the maid. They underestimated the quiet woman at the head of the table. They forgot that silence is not submission. And sometimes the softest voice in the room speaks with the most unshakable power.